Yongin, the big capital of the Shun dynasty empire, is a bustling port city jam-packed with over 1 million folks. And get this, it's like a melting pot of all sorts of cool people from different walks of life. You stroll down the streets, and you'll spot women strutting around in men's clothes or dudes dressed to the nines in fancy outfits. It's all about freedom and being open-minded, reflecting the vibe of the whole Shun empire. Everywhere you turn, youngins just buzzing with life and fancy stuff. It's like that with any big gathering spot, you know? And oh man, the rumors? They're flying around like crazy here. One minute you hear something juicy, and the next, it's vanished into thin air. Like, there's this story about a tiny bird that sings this weird song and supposedly grants wishes to whoever listens. Who knows if it's true, but hey, it's all part of the fun in this lively place. In a little pharmacy over in Yongin, there's a guy named Sa Heonyoung. One day, a customer walks in and starts chatting about some gossip. Song gets curious and asks where the customer heard it from. But the customer's like, don't worry about it. Then, they ask when this goddess is coming, and Song's like, as soon as he hits the hay, she'll start getting ready. Song adds that it's gonna be the one and only chance he'll have to listen to the goddess's song. Then, the customer wonders if it's true that he would fall asleep while hearing the goddess's song. His wishes will come true in his dreams. If that's the deal, the customer figures there's no point in coming back after today. Later that night, the goddess walks into the room and asks who the customer is. They point to the guy lying down, obviously the customer. As she starts singing, there's this masked guy referred to as His Highness who's checking her out. In his head, he's like, wow, her eyes are gorgeous, and those lips? Super enticing. As the guy with the mask reaches for her face, she turns to the customer and casually asks if he had a pleasant dream. He quickly responds that he's leaving, and she nods in understanding. Then, she turns to His Highness, acknowledging him and complimenting his unique eyes, noting their exceptional quality. So, for days later, the goddess is munching on some leaves. She's super hungry 'cause she hasn't eaten in 4 days. She's wondering if she's gotta keep surviving on herbs today too. She kinda wishes she could just die, but then she remembers this voice telling her she has to live and seek revenge for her mom. It's her mom's last wish. Without that, she reckons she would have died along with her mom that day. Tough stuff. She spots this guy and thinks, a goblin? Am I imagining things? But then she remembers seeing him last week, and those eyes look just like his. The guy, who introduces himself as Sa Heonyoung, asks what she's holding. He tells her she just committed a crime. She explains that it's all she's eaten for the past 4 days. Tough situation. She's feeling all woozy from those herbs, and then out of the blue, this guy appears. She's like, he's not supposed to be here, and then refers to him as Mr. Goblin. She tries to speak, but her voice fails her since she's not singing. He softly touches her face, reassuring her that he won't harm her. Then, he pulls her into a comforting hug and points out that not only is she scared of goblins, but she doesn't even have a name of her own. It's a pretty deep moment. He's curious if she's got a special someone in her heart, but she replies that she doesn't even have a name, let alone a man. Then he throws out this quirky question, well, what about a goblin? Wanna be a goblin bride? It's a weird proposal, but who knows, right? At the pharmacy, they tell Song that His Highness is waiting outside. When they step out, Sa Heonyoung and his group are already there, lounging on the ground. Song humbly greets him. Sa Heonyoung's wearing this red goblin mask, and word is, he's a bit of a warmonger, rumored to be into some pretty gruesome stuff like drinking human blood and eating their flesh. Sa Heonyoung isn't just any guy. He's like the emperor's right-hand dude, and all the bigwigs in Yongin are scared stiff of him. Plus, he's also an investigation officer, digging into all sorts of stuff that makes people nervous. But wait, there's more. He's actually the 4th prince of the empire, which is a pretty big deal. And get this, He's also the younger brother of the crown prince, who they call the Devil King. They share the same mom and everything. Sa Heonyoung drops a bomb on Song, saying that even though Song might be his father-in-law, he's not exactly thrilled about it. Song's totally caught off guard and asks if Sa Heonyoung is suggesting that his daughter, Liang, is in Sa Heonyoung's good books. Song freaks out and dashes inside, thinking to himself, no freaking way. Is my wife really cozying up to the Devil King? He storms over to her and straight up accuses her of cheating on him with the Devil King. She flips out and yells back, asking if he's lost his mind. Then she starts laying into him, saying she knows all about his own cheating escapades. As they're going at it, Sa Heonyoung walks in and asks if the woman is lying, and they confirm it. Then he's like, where's the goddess? Song's mind is racing, wondering if that thing is really his daughter, and how Sa Heonyoung even found out. He decides to play along and tells Sa Heonyoung that he'll lead him to her. In her spot where she stays, the goddess recalls Sa Heonyoung's words, when he said he'd find her before the day is out. He warned her not to go anywhere else. She tells herself he's just a figment of her imagination, but it's kinda comforting. It's almost like they made a promise together. It feels like someone out there actually pledged to meet her again. Suddenly, she hears some noise and wonders who it could be. Sa Heonyoung calls out to her, calling her his lady. She thinks to herself that there's only one person in the world who calls her that. Excitedly, she opens the door and sees him, her eyes lighting up with joy. She exclaims, "It's Mr. Goblin." And he replies, saying he's come to take her. He explains that usually, the bride moves into the husband's place after they tie the knot. It took him some time to get her room ready. She affectionately calls him kind Mr. Goblin. She tells him she can't just get up and leave, she's not allowed to go anywhere. She sees him as a kind and innocent goblin, and she can't bear the thought of him getting scolded because of her. He asks her if she'll come with him if she gets permission. Then, he turns to Song and calls him his father-in-law. She's terrified and tries to slip back inside, but he grabs her. He argues that since his bride is going to marry him, it's only natural for her to go with him. Song loses it and calls her a nasty name, and Sa Heonyoung defends her, saying he shouldn't call his future queen names like that. Song quickly apologizes, realizing he messed up. Sa Heonyoung then kneels down and reminds her that she promised to marry him. Tears roll down her cheeks as she agrees, saying yes, she'll be his bride. It's an emotional moment, but it seems like she's made up her mind. In Sa Heonyoung's place, the goddess finishes her bath, and he tells her she's awake. She sits up and looks around, confused, asking who he is and where they are. He reminds her gently that he's her fiancé, the goblin. Then, he asks if she remembers what the herbs she was taking actually were. Taking hallucinogenic stuff is totally against the law. Anyone caught using it, growing it, or even just hanging around when it's happening, they're all in serious trouble and could end up getting executed. And places where they find these herbs? They're supposed to get burned to the ground. The goddess stands up, getting worried because her mom's grave is there. She's heard that if the body gets burned, the soul won't find peace. She begs him not to burn the place down, please. He gets all worked up and promises her he won't burn it down. Then, he pulls her into a hug and swears he'd never do that. She apologizes, saying she shouldn't cry because she's ugly, and it's worse when she does. He lifts her chin and asks why she thinks she's ugly. He tells her he thinks she's been told the wrong thing because, in his eyes, she's the most beautiful woman in the whole wide world. No matter if she's crying or smiling, she's always beautiful. But deep down, she thinks maybe he's not thinking straight, or maybe there's something wrong with his eyes. So, she asks him if he has bad eyesight. He quickly reassures her, saying, "No way. My eyesight's always been top-notch." He feeds her, and she's blown away by how tasty it is. She insists he tries some too because it's seriously the best thing she's ever eaten. Deep down, she wonders if Mr. Goblin used to eat stuff like this all the time. He must know how good it tastes. She's amazed at how yummy and pretty the food is. Suddenly, Sa Heonyoung leans in and plants a kiss on her. He wonders if he messed up somehow, but she worries to herself if he'll be upset if she says he did. She doesn't want that because he's really nice. She reassures him that she can handle washing up on her own. Then, he asks if she's feeling uncomfortable, and she explains it's not that, but he seems a bit unsure about doing this. He admits it's his first time feeling this way about a woman and acting on impulse because of her. She wonders why he's so kind to her when she has nothing to offer. She suggests singing him a song as a thank you, but he suggests something else instead, letting him kiss her again, like he did before. He asks if she's not interested in that. She thinks to herself that she's not sure why he wants to kiss her, but if he wants to, she's up for it. Just as he's about to lean in for the kiss, someone interrupts, saying Assistant Yoon needs to see him right away. He assures her he'll be back soon, but she grabs onto him. He asks if she wants to come along, and she eagerly says yes. He gently wraps her up and carries her, and she worries she might be heavy, but he insists she's actually super light. Assistant Yoon greets him and thinks to herself that His Highness has never been linked with any woman before. So, when she heard he had a concubine last night, it must have pleased Her Highness, the Empress Dowager. But who is this woman? She can't believe she came out so calmly in a man's arms like that. Who is she, and what's she all about? It's got her curious. Sa Heonyoung gently puts her down and explains that he can't help her get dressed. But don't worry, someone else will take care of that. A lady steps forward and introduces herself as Soy, saying she's here to serve Her Highness from now on. Sa Heonyoung adds that he'll stick around in the room while they get her ready. In her thoughts, Soy is pleasantly surprised by how good Her Highness looks. She notices that there are no scars on her face, and she has really fair skin. But she's a bit too skinny for Soy's liking. No worries though, Soy plans to take care of that by making sure she gains some weight. After all, a little extra weight will make Her Highness easier to manipulate in the future. Soy asks her what kind of fruit she wants and apologizes if she pulled her hair too hard. She suggests having some tea. Once she's done dressing her up, she asks if she likes it. The goddess says it's kinda weird. But Sa Heonyoung chimes in, saying that's not true, everything looks great on her. She attempts to take off his mask, but he quickly grabs her hand, saying no way. He reminds her that she wanted to marry him, and he hasn't done it yet. She's curious about his face, wondering if he's embarrassed. He admits he's not that embarrassed, he just thinks he's ugly. She tells him he shouldn't say that and urges him to take off the mask. He's hesitant, thinking she'll laugh at him, but she assures him she won't. He says it's still too early, the night hasn't arrived yet. He promises to take it off when the night comes. But before he can finish, she takes matters into her own hands and removes the mask. With a smile, she declares, "It's night now, you can take it off." Up until now, she never really got why people enjoyed swapping saliva with someone else. But now, as they kiss, it finally clicks for her. She thinks to herself how sweet and passionate it feels, and how insanely satisfying this whole experience is. It's like everything suddenly makes sense. He reminds her to breathe, but she explains her mouth felt blocked. He suggests she breathe through her nose, and they keep kissing. Then, he asks if she knows what the wedding night means. She jokes, asking if he's a woman. He laughs and says he's definitely a man. But she can't help but notice, she's never seen this handsome face before. It's totally new to her, like nothing she's ever seen before. He tries to turn his face away, but she stops him, calling him pretty and saying she wants to see more of it. He chuckles, saying it's a bit odd to call a guy pretty. She insists, describing his eyes as bright and deep like a summer night sky or a soaring bird. She recalls seeing a flower with a similar hue once. He smiles and continues kissing her. He holds her close and asks if her face is turning red just from kissing. Her legs are shaking, showing it's her first time. He explains that she has to do what he's doing, so as he starts taking off his clothes, he tells her to do the same. She smiles and touches his face, noting that it's turned as red as his lips. This woman, whom he fell head over heels for at first glance, they're experiencing everything together for the first time. No matter how patient or skilled you are, dealing with this overwhelming passion, how can anyone handle it? It's like a wild storm of emotions. At night, the goddess wakes up and wonders where that person went. She was so sure he'd stick around, but who is she to think he'd stay with her? He's such a beautiful person. He's definitely a guy, but even his face has this soft, gentle look like a girl who's been cared for dearly. She starts wondering where this place even is. Is it really okay if she doesn't go back? What if her father shows up? Mr. Goblin is such a nice guy. If someone as mean as her dad catches him, he'll be in big trouble. She has to warn him somehow. Then, she realizes she's not wearing any clothes and panics, saying she can't go outside in her underwear. As she looks around, she notices the bedroom is super fancy and tidy. She's been to plenty of rich people's houses to sing before, but this one takes the cake. He sure lives in a nice place. She wonders if there's a lady of the house around. But then she starts to wonder why he wants to marry her. Is he trying to make her a concubine or something? It's got her thinking. So, if she marries him, does that mean she'll be treated like a lowly woman too? That's what the madam used to call her mom. The madam would hit her because she couldn't stand her mom. Even after seeing all that, her dad still couldn't stand it when her mom turned out to be right. He didn't even stick up for her mom. It's a weird situation that nobody's happy with. If it's all because of being treated like a lowly woman, she doesn't want any part of that. But what can she do? Can you even break off a marriage? She's feeling pretty stuck. In her room, Sa Heonyoung remarks that they've really messed up. She ran away without taking anything, not even wearing shoes. How desperate must she have been to bolt like that? It makes him wonder if she was ever really obedient in the first place. He figures she can't have gone too far, so they need to track her down. She seemed to enjoy it, even if she put up a fight at first. Eventually, she'll come around and stick by his side. She's the type who can't resist his kisses. And after being held by a guy like that, she just ran off with only a blanket? When was the last time he felt this angry? It was when he got betrayed by others for the first time. After that, he swore he'd never let anyone betray him again. She's the first person he's opened up to since then. He shouldn't have trusted her, but she never even considered that he shouldn't believe her. There wasn't even a chance to realize that he'd put his faith in her. It all feels like some crazy dream. Time keeps moving on, almost like it's all just a dream. In this strange mix of moments and forever, reality feels like it's falling apart completely. He's caught up in this weird spell, feeling all pumped up and excited. Next time, he's not letting her run away again. While they search for her, they're shocked to find out she's been sleeping outside. The guard explains that when he tried to wake her up to bring her back, she freaked out and threw a stone, screaming. Sa Heonyoung wonders if she ran away and resisted being caught, but the guard says no way, not with that kind of reaction. It's like she's on edge and feeling really scared, looking around desperately. Sa Heonyoung tells everyone to back off. The goddess looks surprised and starts crying, shouting at him not to come closer. But he ignores her and approaches, calling her his bride. When she realizes it's Mr. Goblin, she quickly hugs him. She asks him if he went to see the madam, and he's puzzled why she's shaking so much. She explains that he must have a wife, and he confirms it, saying she's his wife. But she clarifies she's not talking about herself, she means the madam. She calls the madam a lowly woman. He's outraged, asking who dared say that to her. She explains that the madam called her mother a lowly woman, making her mom cry. The madam just got angrier and angrier, and her mom ended up getting beaten really bad. She's upset about it and doesn't want to get married. But he tells her that marriages can't just be cancelled like that. Sa Heonyoung shakes his head and explains that by refusing to take responsibility after marrying a king, she's essentially saying she'll destroy the whole family, including her own blood relatives. It means they're all going to die, even the mountain where her mother lives will be burned down. But if she agrees to be his one and only bride, everything will work out just fine. And there's no one else he wants anyway. As they step into their room, she remarks that with such a fancy house, he must have at least 3 or 4 wives. But he reassures her, saying the only person he needs is her. As the servants bring in water, he tells them to leave. Then, he takes off his mask and reminds her that he said she's his bride. She doesn't know who he really is, right? He's actually the true king, which means she'll be his queen. As he gently wipes her feet, he mentions that she's going to be the madam. She looks both happy and surprised to hear that. She wasn't really thinking about being a queen, but it totally caught her off guard to hear she'll be a madam. I mean, she doesn't even know what a king is, so it's a bit of a shock. As he keeps tending to her feet, she giggles and says it tickles. He gently holds her and tells her to stay still. He explains that this is what married couples do when one of them gets hurt, they comfort each other's bruises. In her head, she wonders what being a married couple even means. She's spent her whole life stuck up in the mountain, only brought down to the main house every now and then. That's where she's seen couples before. Sa Heonyoung licks her leg and tells her that if he ever gets hurt, she should take care of him like this too. His body is craving more, even though it hasn't been long since it discovered pleasure, it's already getting used to it. As he takes off his robe, she notices an old wound. She hugs him and asks if his old wounds aren't healing properly. He reassures her, saying it's okay. It doesn't hurt anymore, but it's still a scar that he hasn't forgotten about. It's the mark that turned him into a goblin. She kisses the wounds, and he comments that her lips feel warm. He asks her to keep covering his body with the warmth of her kisses, so no one will see the scar again. Sa Heonyoung tells her to pause for a bit, but there's something more pressing they need to attend to right now. They start kissing passionately, and after a while, she suddenly remembers him. She asks if he remembers the first time they met. He was wearing all black. After her mother passed away, all she could think about was how to avoid the soldiers' watchful eyes and escape from the mountain. That's all that occupied her mind back then. If only she could escape from that cursed mountain. Sometimes when she's brought down from the mountain, it's a rare day when she gets to eat to her heart's content. On days like that, her father would present her to someone as a goddess. He'd make her sing a song, blindfold her with silk fabric, and dress her up in fancy clothes with a strange gold crown on her head. She sings a soothing song that feels like it goes on forever, her voice echoing until her throat feels raw. Then, just like always, he drags her back to the mountain, trapping her in a life of endless confinement and restraint. When she's stuck in there, death feels like a routine thought. But the day she met him was a bit out of the ordinary. He had unique eyes, blood-colored eyes that seemed to attract vengeful spirits. Yet, his eyes are warm, like the summer night sky. They hold so much of others' resentment, yet they're still warm. His eyes are strong and beautiful, the kind she could never get tired of looking at. Those are his eyes. She asks him if that's how they met, calling him Mr. Goblin, and he corrects her, saying his name is Sa Heonyoung. When she calls him by his name, his heart races. He feels a dryness in his throat, hearing that word. After all, as a member of the Imperial family, who would address him that way? Then, he starts kissing her again, and she calls him cute. It's like a spark at the top of her head, a warm feeling swirling in her stomach. Even though it's a bit scary, she feels really good. She wants to touch him more. After a while, Sa Heonyoung notices that she's already asleep. He figures she must have been tired, so he kisses her gently. The next day, as she bathes, Sa Heonyoung asks why she was outside last night. She explains she was looking for him because she can't walk well. Concerned, he suggests she see a doctor, but she admits she's never seen one before. He thinks to himself, considering all those scars on her body, it's surprising she's never seen a doctor. She places one of the petals on his chest and admires its beauty, comparing it to a flower in the moonlight. Sa Heonyoung comments on her romantic expressions, and she responds by saying she'll show him when they go to the mountain. She adds that it's such a nice place. But when she goes back this time, how will she live? It's such a lonely place. She can handle being hungry, but being lonely, that's like being stabbed with a knife. He questions if she's really going to leave him. He reminds her of all the promises they made, how they spent the night together, and now she's just going to abandon him. She freaks out and denies it, explaining that if her father finds out, he threatened to destroy her mother's grave if she doesn't obey him. If that's the case, he says with a smile, we'll move your mother. We'll hold her funeral together and make offerings together. You won't have to leave me then, because you're the person I like the most in the world. She nods in agreement, yeah, I can keep staying here. Yet, a concern lingers, but what if my father tries to harm you? He offers a confident smile, as long as you're with me, I'll be alright. No one would dare lay a hand on me. The doctor checks her out and says her eyesight has gotten really weak. He mentions she's been straining herself too much on the island. In the future, she might not be able to walk because it'll be tough to see in the dark. Sa Heonyoung jumps in, saying he'll be there to take her wherever she needs to go. When the doctor starts talking about her womb, His Highness shuts him down, saying it's none of his business. He calls his servant Ha So-hai and mentions that his bride doesn't know a lot of things. He asks if she thinks they should let her feet get dirty, and she quickly responds with a no, saying she'll do her best. Then he asks what his bride is up to, and she replies that she's still getting dressed. Just then, his goddess comes out looking beautiful and calls him His Highness as she runs to hug him. He tells her she shouldn't run because her legs are weak. Then he whispers to her and asks who told her to call him His Highness. She responds that all the maids did, and everyone was surprised when she called him by his name. As he carries her, he tells her she can call him by his name. She worries that everyone could get in trouble. She asks if she should call him Lord Heonyoung, and he giggles, saying no. She then hugs him and says she'll call him whatever he likes. She tells him she likes him the most, and if he doesn't want anyone to hear, she thinks Sa Heonyoung is enough for her. He agrees, saying that's fine. He wants to hear her call that name continuously, the name she utters with her lips, soaked in his dreams, just like her song. Sa Heonyoung asks her if she really doesn't have any name. What did her mother use to call her? She says her mother called her baby, and he says he has to put it in their family tree. It would be better to get her a name that sounds wonderful. She says she thought names should be given by one of their parents, and he says it should be given by a guardian. Now, since he's her bride's guardian, he can give her a name. Her cheeks have this lovely pink color, like the petals of a flower. And she smells so good, like a delicate flower too. He hugged her all night yesterday, and now his lips are feeling dry because he wants to hug her again so badly. He tells her that her new name will be Sahonyang, which means eternal flower petals. She smiles when she hears it and starts saying it out loud. He tells her to stop because others should call her by her name. Then, he calls her Yanga and asks her if she ate well. The doctor told her to eat a bit more, and she mentions that the doctor seems different from before, not like the grandpa she saw last time. He explains sadly that the doctor had some bad experience and he's no longer around. She wonders if someone held a grudge against him, and he responds, asking for her opinion. She suggests that if he died suddenly like this, she might have been involved, but he asks if she can see death coming. She confirms that she can, but she can't tell if it's due to murder. She expresses concern that if everyone hates her because of this incident, he might hate her too. He quickly reassures her, saying he would never hate her. He hugs her tightly, promising to never hate his bride for something like that, swearing to God. He's a guy who fell head over heels for her the moment he laid eyes on her, so hating her for something like that never even crossed his mind. On that misty day when they first met, it felt like stepping into a honey trap, so sweet, yet impossible to break free from. He begins kissing her, and she tries to tell him to stop, but he keeps going. He really wants to hold her tight in his arms right now, but he doesn't want to be too rough, not today at least. He figures she doesn't really want him to stop, seeing how much she's enjoying it. He asks her what she wants, and she replies that she wants him. As he starts to loosen his robe, he's interrupted by a message that Lady Yun wants to see him. However, he ignores it and focuses on Heonyoung, telling her to keep her eyes on him and not to look away. The servants outside hear loud moans, stirring up rumors about Sa Heonyoung's affection for his woman. They speculate about him bringing her in the middle of the night like a treasure and attempting to marry her despite the Empress's knowledge. Sa Heonyoung steps out and asks what's going on. The servant lady explains that Her Highness wants him and his wife to meet her immediately. He sighs in frustration because his mother demands her presence, and he feels responsible for protecting his wife. He emerges from the room, holding Heonyoung in his arms. Someone questions if he intends to leave like that, and he responds that he can't go against his mother's orders. He's decided to take her to the Empress, even if she's still asleep like this. The servant lady wonders if the Empress will wake up, and he explains that his bride is too fragile to cause any trouble in the palace. She can't do much right now. The servant then mentions hearing that she's someone who can grant wishes, and the Empress wants her to fulfill a wish. Sa Heonyoung notices his mother and remarks that she appears to be facing some difficulty. He explains that he had to bring someone who wasn't feeling well. His mother responds by accusing him of neglecting her as soon as he got a woman. He argues that he hasn't disobeyed any of her orders so far. His mother counters, questioning how he could say that when he hasn't even introduced his bride. She insists on preparations for the ceremony and adding her name to the family tree, but he dismisses the need for her to delve into those matters. He argues that it's simply about adding her name to the family tree, and the wedding ceremony can follow customs. His mother glances at Heonyoung and opposes the idea, questioning how he could bring a woman into the palace on his own whim. He tells his mother that she's the woman he fell in love with at first sight, and he never thought about her background for that. His mom responds, saying that's how it usually goes between a man and a woman. She adds, isn't it the first time he's ever met a woman outside after growing up? He insists his mother not to call his bride cheap, she's not from a lowly background. He adds that if there's any woman he wants to be with, he can bring her. Didn't his father mention this many times before? She confirms that his father indeed mentioned choosing someone from 4 generations. He states that he doesn't require a woman from a noble lineage. Rising from his seat, he suggests they depart for now. As they ride in the carriage, Heonyoung opens her eyes, and Heonyoung comments that she must be tired. She silently wonders where they are going, hoping he won't say he's taking her home. Startled, Heonyoung asks what's wrong, and she ponders if she'll ever see this man again. Trembling, she reaches out and tries to remove his mask, but he stops her, saying it's not the right place. Anxiously, she expresses her fear that he'll leave her once they arrive. Confused, he asks what she means by break up, and she pleads with him to show his face. Even though he's been holding her all along, she suddenly feels scared. He covers their heads with a big blanket and assures her that she can look at him now. He promises to take care of everything. She asks if they'll never see each other again, and he's puzzled by her question. She explains that he's sending her back home. He reassures her, saying she'll never return to that place again. Her mother is already in the temple, and they'll go together tomorrow to give her a proper funeral. He asks if she made that face because she didn't want to break up with him. If she doesn't want to break up, then is she willing to stay with him forever? She nods and says yes, if he wants to, she would love to stay with him forever. At Horyonsa, Young staggers as she performs the ceremony, and people gossip about her and the king. Young and Heonyoung reach the house, and he says it must be hard for her. She kneels down, bows, and then she'll be standing for a long time. Her legs are weak, she's been working hard all day. As he rubs her, she insists she's fine now, but she's still shaking. Her face has turned red again. In the morning, she stood firmly, but now she's disheveled. Doesn't she know how much he loves to see her cute reaction like this? She says she likes it, and he tells her to bear with it for a moment. As he opens her legs wide, he asks if she's embarrassed. She wonders what if someone comes in, and he assures her that no one would dare enter because they value their life. He begins kissing her, and she wonders if he enjoys it. He responds with a yes, and they proceed with their intimate moment. The maids arrive with jewelry and a red silk from Xi'an. His Majesty Mengwang arranged it for her. It's the finest luxury in the city. Young admires it briefly and then walks away. The maids wonder if she wasn't interested because she didn't even take a proper look at it. In the room, Young watches Heonyoung sleep and thinks he's pretty. She starts singing softly, and he wakes up and hugs her. He asks if it's a song, but as he reaches out to touch her, she tells him to stop because they already spent the whole night together. He expresses disappointment because she fell asleep first. She explains that her lower body hurts, but he tries to initiate intimacy again. She reminds him that the sun will rise soon, and he realizes they need to hurry because it's their wedding day. She questions which wedding they're referring to, and he replies that it's theirs while kissing her. They become intimate, but he interrupts, apologizing because he's going to be busy today. He glances at her and notices she's asleep. He remarks that she's sleeping in the same position again, leaving him alone. He suggests it would be nice if she could change this habit, as he needs to start preparing for the wedding. After the wedding ceremony, as they return to their room, he apologizes, acknowledging that it must have been tough for her. She sits down, expressing that her head feels really heavy. He explains that it's because of the gash, and reassures her that she can rely on him now. As he takes off the gash, he checks if her head feels lighter, and she confirms it. He reassures her that they're almost done with everything. The only thing left is to visit the Imperial Palace and meet his parents. She mentions it'll be her first time meeting such important people. He explains that his father is away at another palace, so she only needs to greet his mother and the crown prince today. There's not much else on the agenda. She compares wedding ceremonies to ancestral rites, saying they're equally challenging. She starts feeling drowsy, and he notices. He asks if she's feeling sleepy, and she admits to feeling a little tired. He mentions he has something important to tell her, but she's already asleep. He figures it's a big deal, and she'll be surprised when she wakes up and hears it. Wearing a stunning wedding gown crafted from exquisite silk, memories flood his mind. One particular memory stands out vividly. The morning was just perfect as he woke up to the sweet song of his lovely bride. Will the calmness of the day persist, or will she also become afraid of him? As they arrive at the Imperial Palace, she greets the Empress and introduces herself as Sa Heonyoung. The Empress kindly asks her to lift her head. Young is taken aback by how beautiful his mother is when she gazes at her. The Empress remarks that Young has a distinct taste, but everyone stays quiet. Then, the prince enters, declaring it's a special day because it's Heonyoung's wedding day. He announces he'll host the feast. Glancing at Young, he comments that she must be the woman from the rumors. He warmly welcomes her as the queen, leaving Young shocked. It's baffling how two people can look so alike. Every person has something unique that shows they're their own individual, like their face. He was a goblin, hiding inside a human's womb, pretending to be human. There's this goblin, right? He's born at the same time as a human, which is kinda weird because usually, goblins get the boot as soon as they're born. But this one's lucky 'cause his mom just couldn't bring herself to do it. So, he grows up as a goblin. Now, he's remembering the first time he met this consort lady. The Empress ordered it, but the consort has no clue who he is. Young suddenly starts shaking and says she needs to take her medicine. The doctor asks if it's the abortion medicine. He's surprised because, you know, a lady from a fancy family like hers shouldn't be taking that kind of medicine. He can't even remember what that woman looked like, except for her 2 still legs. But Young's face is stuck in his memory forever. He's so into her that even if he kicks the bucket one day, his ghost will be out there, searching high and low just to catch a glimpse of her face. He just can't shake her off his mind, no matter how hard he tries. So, he's gotta dive right in. Holding Young's hand to help her walk, she suddenly blurts out that the prince looks just like him. She didn't say he looks like the prince, she said the prince looks like him. Then, Young adds that he's even prettier than the prince. So, he just grabs her and gives her a big hug. Does she even realize how much she's done for him just then? From being a goblin, she's turned him into a real human. Now, they're announcing the Moon King's arrival. Heonyoung tells his mom that his wife's legs aren't strong enough yet, and walking for too long could hurt them. His mom suggests getting some help from the servants for that. She's curious why he doesn't let his wife get help from his own crew. He shoots back, questioning how they could be better than him. His mom jumps in, telling him to quit being so disrespectful and to let his wife down gently. She's not down with this behavior. But he's all, okay, if that's the deal, let's head out then. They've been saying things will get dicey once a tamed beast goes into heat, and that's exactly what's happening now. The prince tells Heonyoung that he's been giving them warnings since day one, and now it's time for everyone to straighten up and fly right. Back then, he didn't stab him in the heart like he should have. He should have taken him down for good, but he was just too young and clueless. As Heonyoung strolls along, the crown prince flags him down and invites him to a big shindig happening on Friday night. He wants Heonyoung to be there. Heonyoung mentions he's recently hitched, but his mom cuts in, asking if he's seriously thinking of defying the crown prince's invite. Meanwhile, Young quietly thinks to herself that Heonyoung is acting kinda strange lately, and it's likely because of the crown prince, who looks a lot like him. He's sitting up there in the top spot, grinning away. But if you really pay attention, you'll notice that person ain't smiling one bit. And if you take a closer peek, they don't even look alike. Heonyoung never smiles like that, not even when he's wearing a mask. The crown prince mentions it's been ages since Heonyoung stayed over at the palace. He points out that their mom always looks after the place for them. He figures that when Heonyoung gets old and starts feeling lonely, he'll end up coming back eventually. You can't just ditch your family forever, right? After all, every critter needs its owner. No matter if he's called a goblin or some other creature, it's all the same to him. He's never really been treated like a regular person anyway. All he needs is to hear his wife's sweet voice, and that's all that matters to him. As they reach the guest house, Young thinks to herself that there's a familiar smell in the air. It's the scent of loneliness. Heonyoung tells her it's not a great spot, but she should tough it out for a while. Once the banquet's done, they won't have to come back here again. She tells him he doesn't seem to fancy his doppelganger, the crown prince. He insists they're spitting images of each other, but she disagrees, saying they don't really look alike. He brushes it off, claiming it's a secret that they're so similar. Then she wonders if he wears a mask because he looks like the crown prince. He asks if she's heard about goblin eggs. Apparently, female goblins lay these eggs, but they're tricky to hatch because the male goblin gets attached to them. She suggests that if the male goblin likes the egg so much, why not raise it together? It turns out the male goblin eats the eggs, which totally shocks Young. He explains that to avoid the male goblin, the female hides her eggs in a human's womb. The human doesn't even know it, but they end up raising the goblin's offspring alongside their own child. Since they both have identical faces, they can't figure out who's the goblin. So, he confesses that he's the goblin. When she tries to take off his mask, he quickly stops her. She questions if he's seriously not letting her take it off right now, and he just nods. She asks if he knows about twins, and he's like, yeah, sure I do. But he explains that the Imperial family doesn't have twins. According to noble bloodlines, twins aren't supposed to be born. Then she wonders what noble blood is like and if goblin blood at least looks different in color. He asks if she's okay with being married to a goblin, and she just smiles and says yes. After all, she already said yes to Sir Goblin's proposal. She used to live all alone up in a lonely mountain, where she couldn't even chat with anyone. Every day felt like waiting for her time to kick the bucket. But then, like some kind of miracle, along came Sir Goblin, her knight in shining armor. She casually asks him if it's okay that her blood is red, and he just chuckles, assuring her he's aware. Later, at the Imperial party hall, Xi'an tries to say something but messes up the pronunciation. Heonyung jumps in and corrects her, and they both end up laughing about it. He admits that even though he was feeling down earlier, her mix-up of words, calling it the Emperor Play Hall, was just too funny, and he couldn't help but laugh. He asks if she wants to learn how to write and if she'd like to study with him. She beams a big smile and asks him if he's serious. He hugs her and confirms that he really means it. As they walk into the hall, everyone's staring at them. Even though he usually can't stand all the attention, today it doesn't bother him much. As long as she's right there beside him, he's cool with it. As people dance around, Heonyung and his wife take their seats. He suggests she might feel better if she has a sip of alcohol. Then, he notices her gaze wandering, and asks who she's checking out. She replies that she's just looking around at everyone. He teases her, saying she should only have eyes for him since he's a jealous guy. She's puzzled by the word jealousy, so he explains it as the feeling that makes him want to check the blood color of anyone who's looking at her. She wonders if he's checking for goblin blood, noble blood, or just regular human blood. He laughs and says it's pretty much the same thing. She asks what color his blood is, so he bites his hand and shows her. Then, she bites her own hand, and they compare colors. She notices it's the same color. He stands up and tells her she shouldn't do things like that. It's not worth it to see her blood. She asks why he did it, and he explains that he's a guy and he's toughened up from training. He's used to getting hurt and healing fast. But she's a girl, and her body isn't as strong. She insists that she can handle it too if it's just a little bit. She tells him not to do it again or else she'll do it too, but he promises he won't. He moves his mask a bit and plants a kiss on her finger. This ticks off the Crown Prince, who calls Heonyung over. Xi'an starts shaking when she sees the Crown Prince. Heonyung gently lifts her chin and reminds her that he just told her to focus on him. She tries to look away, but he insists she keep her eyes on him. He warns that if she doesn't, the groom might lose it on his wedding day. She agrees to do as he wishes. If a goblin's supposed to wear a goblin mask, then whether he wears it or not, he'll still be seen as a prince who's into trouble. Especially if he's causing a scene like this, he's bound to get someone angry. The Crown Prince strides over and reminds Heonyung that even if he claims to be beastly, he's still part of the royal family. There are rules in place, so what's he up to? Heonyung explains that this is his first marriage and he wants to be seen as a wise man, not a beast. The Crown Prince's face gets all serious and frowny at that. Xi'an grabs her husband's clothes and tells him she wants to leave. She can't stand being here, it's all so weird. Heonyung agrees, saying that since the Crown Prince said something kind, they'll head out now. His heart is racing, eager to get going. He's always putting on a nice act, but deep down, he's just plain mean. He's probably itching to dish out some punishment, thinking about who else is going to bite the dust tonight. Back at their palace, Heonyoung mentions he heard she's turning 26 this year. He brings out a drink and says it's special, it's as old as both of them put together. It might be a bit intense for her, but it's an Imperial tradition, so she's gotta sip it. So, she takes a sip of her drink and doesn't like it much. Quick thinking, he gives her a kiss and she chugs it down. He checks if she's alright, and she nods. He's like, oops, didn't realize it was that strong. Then, he asks for forgiveness. She asks him if he's ever drunk before, and he admits it's his first time. He explains that this drink is specially made for the couple in the bridal room. Then, he tells her about the sad story of the first queen consort who tragically ended her life before they could share this drink together. He mentions it's getting warm and kinda bums out that he's not great with booze. She reassures him, saying he drank it like a champ. Then he's all like, hey, if it's for my bride, I'd even swallow fire. But she's quick to say no to fire, warning him he'd get burnt. And he's all determined, saying he'd do anything to have her. She gives him a hug, saying he doesn't need to go to such extremes. He reassures her, saying she's sticking around for good, right? She nods, promising to stay by his side forever. Relieved, he decides he doesn't need to swallow any fire then. Things start heating up between them, and in the moment, he hands her the drink. They keep getting cozy, and he jokes that he won't let her catch any Z's this time. The next morning, someone tells him that the head maid of the Empress, Yun, is at the door. Heonyoung tells everyone to shush and get ready quietly so they don't wake up his bride. He steps outside and casually asks what the crown prince has done now. She tells him that the crown prince offed someone again, and he's like, yep, sounds like him blowing off steam. The crown prince has always been a mean one, even when he was just a kid. He'd get a kick out of causing harm to animals and birds, and now that he's grown, he's moved on to people. That put the emperor in a tough spot cause everyone was starting to see how nasty the crown prince could be. To cover up his messes, someone always had to take the fall. Because of this, our guy gets dragged into battles as a distraction. Bam, just like that, he gets slapped with the title and gets chained up as a general inspector. Now he's the crown prince's right-hand man, swinging his sword around to deal with anyone who gets in the prince's way. From behind the scenes, he's basically running the show, pulling strings and taking charge of the whole court. The crown prince, who can't stand waiting around for anything, has to deal with all sorts of stuff that require patience. But guess who ends up doing it all? Heonyoung, of course. So, while one guy shines brightly in the court, the other's stuck in the shadows, doing all the grunt work. He asks the head maid, Yun, what she's there for, and she says the empress wants a message sent to the moon queen. Her Majesty says the queen needs to show up for some lecture, like it's some kind of rule or something. He's curious and asks what law she's talking about. Yun explains it's about this noble lecture thing. It sounds more like a boring talk than anything else. They want him to wake up the one who just dozed off, then make her do something first thing in the morning. No way. As the crown prince mentioned, she's out cold, and dragging her out won't be easy. Yun should pass that message along for sure. He's like, nah, not my thing, and I'm too busy for this. He tells her to scram. He was born as a goblin, but he's not into all that magic stuff. Plus, he doesn't have any horns. Even though his folks call him a goblin, that's just how it is, and he figures he'll be one till he kicks the bucket. Life's a bit shaky, but he's cool with it. He's just happy living this way. But hey, don't even think about messing with his girl. He's not letting anyone touch her, not even her soul. Song, Heonyoung's dad, shows up at the palace. The head maid gives him a heads up, saying even though he's the queen's dad, he needs to be respectful when he meets her. If the queen wants to see him, she'll let him know. Song's thinking to himself, like, does she really think he came here for fun? He's not thrilled about hobbling around to see the king's wife. He's also wondering where the king found this lady. And now she's all high and mighty, even becoming an inspector. She's gotta know he grows weed, no doubt about it. Before she spills the beans to the king, he needs to shut her up. As they announce the queen's arrival, he's thinking to himself that she's not worth more than a pet. He can't wrap his head around why she's being treated like some big deal. He tells her he wants to chat in private since they haven't caught up in ages. It's all about family stuff, and he's hoping she'll think about it. She's terrified of him, even though he's her dad. But she can't stand him. She just wants to bolt. The head maid tells Heonyoung she wants to ask for permission. She puts her hand on Heonyoung's head and reminds everyone in the room that they all serve the queen. Basically, she's asking what kind of wound the queen has, and everyone already knows about it. She straight up tells Heonyoung's dad that he can forget about ever having a private chat with her. It's just not happening. He's all like, "But I'm the queen's dad," and insists on a private meeting. She fires back, saying she didn't realize being a father was such a big deal. Heonyoung steps out, and Young rushes to hug him. He wonders why she went out when she promised never to see her family again. She explains that she didn't go out because she wanted to see them. They said they wanted to see her and had something to tell her. He suggests they head inside and hear what they have to say there instead. Song thinks to himself that the bird he left behind seems pretty important to the king. It might be useful to him somehow. After Young goes inside, Heonyoung tells Song to never come back here and to never even glance at the place again. Heonyoung mentions that the king is cutting him some slack. He notices another guy and points out how similar he looks. His maid chimes in, saying it's the son-in-law who came with Song Gunryang. They seem familiar to each other, which is why that night, Young got the wrong idea, especially since it was dark. She's not good at being suspicious of others, even though she can handle pain and has been through tough times. She can't even figure out what's going on. It's like, how did she end up in this situation? It freaks her out, and Heonyoung suggests they get the underground prison ready. At the pharmacy, folks are whispering about what happened. It's a mess, the place got torched. One lady mentions that last night, some inspection team rolled through, and they hauled Song's family off. Word is, Mr. Song got nabbed for growing drugs. As Heonyoung strolls around the palace, he's thinking about his wife and how he doesn't really know what she's been through. Sure, he's considered asking her about it, but he doesn't want to bring back any painful memories. Just being around someone like her dad is tough enough for her. He's noticing this strange smell of blood, which is weird cause he's never experienced it like this before, even after seeing lots of people die. It's like the scent sticks to him, even when he's not actually covered in blood. He's feeling this intense rage, ready to tear everyone apart, the ones who made Young scream like that, and the ones who hurt her body. He's ready to hunt down anyone who made Young feel worthless, but he's puzzled by this feeling inside him. It's not like the urge to swing his sword or to burn everything down. It's more like a chill running through him, a cold kind of anger. It's not anger, it's more like a feeling of regret, gnawing at him. He wishes he could shake it off. He doesn't want Young to see this side of him. He just wants to be loving and gentle with her. Inside the room, he wonders if Young is up yet. She rushes over and gives him a hug. She asks why he didn't come last night, and he explains he had some stuff to take care of. Didn't the servants tell her? He's surprised to hear she waited for him all night. Then, she starts unbuttoning his shirt. He's confused and asks what's up, but she pushes him onto the bed. He grins, asking if she missed him that much. She admits she thought he was going through a tough time. Her dad is pretty intimidating, and then there's that other guy he ran into. She's been fretting about whether he got roughed up or something. If he's in trouble or hurt, she'd be beside herself. Her mom always warned her not to kick the bucket, but without him, she can't even picture life. It'd be unbearable. She's worried sick that her dad and those folks might have harmed him. She prays with all her might for him to come back safe and sound. She's ready to do whatever it takes, to endure any pain, just to have him back. Tears start flowing, and Heonyoung can't help but wonder what happened to her. How did someone so sweet end up so scared? He gives her a kiss and suggests they hit the hay since she stayed up all night. They get close and he tells her how great she looks. She mentions feeling tired and wanting to rest. He's surprised at how much she's into it. He asks if he touched her, where and how, and wonders if she cried a lot. It's like all that anger she felt earlier just took over her. She bursts into tears, accusing him of lying. He had said they'd hit the hay if she was tired. He chuckles and jokes that they'll only sleep if she can actually manage to doze off. Then, he covers them both with the blanket and compliments her hair. He promises to keep her hair smelling fresh, never like blood. But he's still torn about what to do with his mixed-up thoughts. He's already a bit messy, and it looks like he'll keep getting dirtier. That's why she's okay with getting a little dirty too. While he's snoozing, Young waves at him, but he doesn't stir. She figures he must be exhausted. Usually, he tidies up for her, but it seems like that won't happen tonight. As she's about to head out, he asks if she needs anything. She requests 2 wet towels, and he promises to bring them soon. He brings the towels and then plops back down. She notices his scar and wonders who caused it. It's too big to just be from a little scrape. Does he want to get rid of it? It would be nice if it vanished. It's not the kind of thing that'll go away with a good scrubbing. As she cleans, she realizes she'll have to clean his private area too, which she hadn't thought about before. She's pondering what to do, and then he pipes up, telling her she doesn't need to clean anymore. He's really touched that she wiped it off. His heart is racing because her little hands are all over him. He grabs her and offers to take over, saying he'll clean up for her instead. She tells him he doesn't have to, but he insists and ends up causing her to scream and cry. While she's bathing, he asks if she's mad. He apologizes and begs her to show him her face. He joins her in the bath and asks if she cried. She reminds him they agreed to stop when she was tired, and he apologizes, admitting he was a bit harsh. He admits that something rough went down today, so he kinda acted like a kid without realizing it. He feels bad cause he didn't know the whole story. For years, she's been by herself, crying, hurting, and terrified. He's kicking himself for not understanding sooner. Whenever she can't see well or walk right, he blames himself entirely. He beats himself up for not realizing she was out there all along. How could he not know about such a strong bond? She asks him what the bad thing is, and he hesitates, saying it's not exactly something she'll want to hear. He figures there's nowhere else to let out these emotions, so he just bottles them up inside, even though he knows it's kinda cowardly. But despite all that, he still finds himself falling for her. He might grumble a bit, but then he ends up giving her another hug. Heonyoung heads to the prison, and Song pleads for his help. He promises to spill everything if Heonyoung helps him out. He starts off by saying that whenever he drinks booze, he feels totally different. He used to hang around where Her Highness lived, but he swears he never did anything to her. He couldn't even touch her. He explains that he didn't know where she was because she was always hiding up in the mountains. Plus, his wife was always holding him back, so he couldn't even go up there sometimes. He's adamant that he didn't do anything wrong, and he pleads with the king to trust him. So he claims he didn't do anything? Well, let's think about it. A guy like him creeping around every single day must have made her lose sleep. She probably felt terrified that he'd show up every time she opened her eyes. With the way he treated her and the fear he instilled in her, he has the nerve to say he didn't do anything? Song keeps pleading for mercy, but Heonyoung isn't having it. He tells his servant not to let Song off easy. He wants Song to feel his anger, even after death. 3 days later, the entire Song family meets their end. They're all gone, thanks to Heonyoung's wrath. The head maid of the Empress approaches Heonyoung, relaying a message. The Empress wants him to keep his word. It might seem a bit bold coming from a servant, but she has something important to say. The Empress has been patient, and she hopes Heonyung won't let the mercy of the nobles go to waste. Heonyung remarks that the head maid says that phrase way too often, almost like he's not noble himself. He remembers a time from his youth when he briefly took off his mask, and the crown prince slashed him with a short sword. It turns out it was the head maid, Yun, who ratted him out to the crown prince. He recalls how his nanny, who was like a second mom to him, was the first person to betray him in his life. Now, back in the present, Heonyung's getting ticked off. He feels disrespected that she's asking him to beg for mercy from the nobles. She should remember that her master is a nobleman, so all she needs to focus on is her own lowly life. In her thoughts, head maid Yun admits that Heonyung was like her own kid. Even when others called him names like Goblin or Devil King, she was always proud of him. But how could she go against the crown prince's orders? Besides that one time, she's always done her utmost for him. It was just that one time. As she drops to her knees, Heonyung mentions that his bride will come by tomorrow. Knowing that, she can leave now. The next day, as Young and Heonyung get dressed, she reminds him that he said he'd join them today. He assures her that he'll take her to meet the Empress, and she should pass along his regards too. He tells her she should address the Empress as mother because she's like a mom to her now. She laughs, finding it tough, and he reassures her she doesn't have to say it if it's too hard. Besides, all the Empress wants is just a song. She agrees happily, and they chat, share jokes, and give each other hugs for a while. They head outside to light up lanterns together. They jot down their wishes and send them off into the sky. After that, they plan to hop on a boat and enjoy some tasty grub together. They've got a good feeling about how the day will turn out. Arriving where the Empress is, she thinks to herself that the place smells like death. Curious, she asks Heonyung if the place was built on a grave or battlefield. He admits it's kinda true. He tells her to go in and return quickly. She wonders if they're not going in together, and he explains that he has some business to attend to. He'll take her to see the head maid, Yun, and they'll meet up at home later. The maids tell her he's super busy, so she can't really cling to him. But truth be told, she can't stand this gorgeous place. She hates his mom and his royal brother too. In fact, she's scared of everyone here. The whole place feels heavy and stifling, like it's crushing her. She tells him she'll catch up with him later. But she senses something weird, like there's a spooky voice whispering in her head. No matter how much she strains, she just can't make out what it's saying. Inside the palace, the Empress mentions to Young that she heard if she listens to her song while drifting off to sleep, her wishes might just come true. Young expresses uncertainty, and the Empress snaps at her, scolding her for her hesitation. She orders them to pull Young away, calling her impertinent. Yun intervenes, suggesting that they can deal with the punishment later. She wonders if Young's ability might be affected because she's not feeling well. The Empress cuts Yun off, saying she gets it, and tells Young she's had enough. Young thinks to herself that this all feels too familiar, and she knows she's going to get punished today. Later that night, as Young sings, the Empress freaks out, yelling that she's going to kill her. The Empress mentions how Young promised to grant her wishes and answer her questions in her dreams. She's holding a whip and lashes out at Young, questioning how that thing could possibly be her child. It just doesn't make any sense. As Young keeps getting whipped, she feels the pain inside. It's hard to catch her breath. She wonders why Heonyung left her in a place like this, but she knows she can't blame him. He didn't know all this would go down. She figures if she just tries to breathe through it and lets the Empress do her thing, everything will be okay afterwards. She'll get to see Heonyung again, and this whole mess will just fade away like it never happened. Back at Heonyung's palace, he checks in with the servants to see if the queen's back yet. He feels all wobbly. How could this be happening? He needs to chill and think straight. Those who kicked this off, how dare they mess with him like this? How is he supposed to calm down when his wife still hasn't come back? As he tries to leave, his assistant grabs him, warning that if he goes now, he'll be labeled a traitor and dealt with. He wonders what expression she had before. Was she scared? He's well aware of how ruthless the people in the Imperial Palace can be. That place just isn't right for Xi'an. So why did he even leave her there when he knows she doesn't belong in that kind of environment? He's kicking himself because he knew he shouldn't have let her go. He's scared stiff. What if she messes up? He drops to his knees, praying to God that he'll take all the blame. He'd rather take the heat himself than see anything happen to his wife. There's this tiny bird, kind of mysterious, you know? It sings these magical tunes that make wishes come true. If you hear its song, bam! Your wish gets granted, but here's the catch: if you're wishing for the truth, well, brace yourself. You'll get the real deal, even if it's not exactly what you were hoping for. It's like this bird has some serious power to make dreams come alive, but it doesn't mess around when it comes to the truth. The Empress spills the beans, saying she only raised Heonyoung because she was feeling kinda vulnerable, not because she actually sees him as her kid. Then she orders Xi'an to sing again, insisting she'll find out who's responsible for putting that goblin's egg in her belly. As she speaks, Xi'an lies on the floor, covered in blood. Inside, she's reeling. What's the Empress saying? That she wasn't really Heonyoung's mom? But he himself told her to meet the Empress. She gave birth to him, for goodness sake. Now, the Empress claims he's from some goblin's egg. It just doesn't make sense to her. Heonyoung is like this amazing, super strong, and totally perfect guy who saved her. But you know what? Sometimes he seems kinda lonely. On those days, when he needs a hug, she's always there for him. She wraps her arms around him as tight as she can, just to let him know he's not alone. No matter how hard she squeezed him in her arms, it never felt like enough. Deep down in his soul, he still seemed cold and lonely. She couldn't help but wonder if things would have been different if someone had hugged him when he was just a little kid. Maybe then, he wouldn't feel so alone. The Empress threatens Xi'an, saying she better start singing or else she'll cut out her tongue. But why is she saying Heonyoung isn't her son? Xi'an doesn't want to believe that either. She can't bear the thought of denying Heonyoung, not even in her dreams. She refuses to sing for someone who's trying to erase him from existence. The Empress wonders why someone like Xi'an, who she considers lowly and dirty, dares to look at her with defiance. She can't comprehend why Xi'an would be anything but overjoyed to be queen. She imagines it must have been a sweet experience for her, getting to live a life she could only dream of. Despite Xi'an being unfit for the role of queen, the Empress decides to ignore her behavior for now. The Empress demands that Xi'an reveal who dared to put the goblin's egg in her stomach, threatening to cut off their tongue if she doesn't comply. She tightens her grip around Xi'an's neck and asks if she prefers being abandoned instead. Xi'an wonders if being abandoned means she'll be seen as a sinner. If she becomes a sinner, will she still be able to meet Heonyoung? She really hates the idea, but if choosing to be abandoned means avoiding something worse, just then, she loses consciousness. She blinks and looks around, confused about where she is. She can't remember what she was just talking about. There's a window with a beautiful design, sunlight streaming in, and Heonyoung's glowing face. They had planned to go hunting together, write down their wishes, and release a lantern into the sky. Tears roll down her cheeks, and her hand falls limply. The guards think she might have died, as she seemed unable to endure it anymore. A couple of days later, the Crown Prince asks his servant how the goblin has been faring, and the servant says he passed out after hearing the news. The servant mentions he went to the Cliff of the Sinners to search for the queen's body. He's sifting through the corpses one by one to find her. At the Cliff of the Sinners, Heonyoung shouts Xi'an's name, desperately searching for her. He digs frantically while his servant warns of an impending landslide. He's torn. How will he ever find her if everything gets buried? Are they seriously suggesting he abandon her here among the sinners forever? That's not an option. She'll never find peace like that. How could they even think of leaving her here? It must have been agonizing for her. Who has the nerve to suggest such a thing? Feeling resentment now, she never even understood what it meant before. She was just his lovely bride, like a delicate flower. His body feels weighed down by it all, her resentment enveloping him. But if that's all he has left of her, then she should never leave him. In the palace, Heonyoung asks his maid why his wife died. She explains that the Empress, who fell asleep to Young's song, got angry because her wish didn't come true. So, she whipped the queen. The only thing his mother wanted to know was who put the goblin egg in her stomach. The mother, with noble blood, always believed that one of the concubines forced her to give birth to a filthy goblin. Imagine how excited the Empress must have been after hearing about the bird that grants any wish. The maid says the Empress mentioned that if Young didn't want to become a sinner, she wouldn't have to sing again. Young then asks if she were to become a sinner, would the Empress acknowledge him as her son? It became her will. His foolish and kind bride, why did she lose her life over something so trivial? Just to make the Empress acknowledge him as a human being. She left in this way after saying such nonsensical things. Who is he really? He didn't understand anything while she was suffering. What is it about him that she liked so much? It's all a mystery to him. He reflects on his failures as a husband. He couldn't shield her, couldn't make her path smooth with flowers, or even send her off in a white boat. He recalls someone saying the path to the afterlife is bathed in blood. He resolves to illuminate it, making it shine as brightly as the sun. In the evening, Heonyoung takes off his mask and asks how far she's gone. He wonders if she can see Baemang Mountain. Since her eyesight is poor at night and her legs are weak, he advises her to take it slow. He crushes his mask, emphasizing the need for caution. It feels strange to him. He spent his entire life being careful not to lose anything, but now that he's lost something, he's starting to see that he never truly had much to begin with. After living for 30 years, he's realizing that what he thought he had was just an illusion. A guy named Sojang walks into Heonyoung's room. He says he's brought the heads as Heonyoung requested. When he sees Heonyoung, he's shocked and calls him the Crown Prince. Heonyoung asks if he really cut all their necks. Sojang nods and says he doesn't need his mask anymore, tossing it aside. When a person's turning into a goblin, it's like they're halfway between being human and being something else. So maybe wearing a mask helps hide that transition. But once they're fully a goblin, what's the point of hiding behind a mask? It's like pretending to be something you're not when there's no need for it. And what's the use of all the stares and attention in the world when the person you care about isn't around anymore? It's like all those eyes are meaningless without the one person who matters most. Heonyoung walks into the prison and checks with the guard to make sure nobody's dead. He doesn't want to kill anyone recklessly. His bride has weak eyes, so bright lights are a big problem for her. On the way to Baemang Mountain, even if they clean up well, there will still be lots of blood. So, they shouldn't spill the blood of innocent people. The Crown Prince always made his wife feel small and insignificant in his presence. Whenever they were together, it was like walking on eggshells, never knowing when he would lash out. He had a habit of making hurtful jokes, often suggesting humiliating things like being naked together, just to assert his dominance. The Crown Princess wasn't shocked to find out that Heonyoung was the Crown Prince's twin. He finds her in the Crown Prince's room, where his wife has given him something to make him sleep. He tells her that he'll become the Crown Prince after Friday night. He asks her what she wants to do. If she wants to leave the palace, he'll help her. She'll finally be free from her husband's abuse and violence. He suggests another option: she could become an accomplice to her brother-in-law's high treason. Even then, she'll remain the crown princess and could be an empress in the future. But, as his sister-in-law, she'll still have to deal with toxic situations until she dies. He apologizes for dropping this heavy decision on her suddenly, but they're running out of time. She sets a condition: the crown prince must stay away forever. If he agrees, she'll keep their conversation secret and marry King Moon. Heonyung then tells his chief guard to flood the prison with water until it's completely submerged. The next day in the palace, the Empress can't help but think about all the rumors swirling around. They're saying the crown prince has been acting differently lately, avoiding parties and drinking. She knows deep down that he's starting to realize things. After all, he's her son, and she knows him better than anyone. People are even whispering that he might not be the real crown prince, but she dismisses such nonsense. How could she not recognize her own flesh and blood? It's absurd to think otherwise. Her loyalty to her son is unwavering. When Heonyung enters as the crown prince, his mother greets him, but he insists he doesn't have to. She's puzzled by his words and asks how he can say that to his own mother. As she stares at his face, she questions why someone who looks like a goblin is wearing her son's clothes. She wonders aloud where her real son is if Heonyung is the goblin. She shouts at him, but he quickly covers her mouth and tells her to be careful. He confirms that it's indeed him. She tries to speak, but her voice fails her. He mentions the blood on her hands and remarks that dealing with it required some thinking, but it's easier than cutting off her tongue. He tells her that she took away his only bride, his everything, but he can't do the same to her. The kindness she showed him is immense, so he's ready to live as her son. He suggests that her son is now like a fish, better off in a tank. As for the Empress, he's uncertain about her fate. She was known for her stunning beauty, so maybe a doll would suit her well. What does she think? Later that night, as Young opens her eyes, she wonders where she is. She sees head maid Yun, and she asks where they are. Yun responds, saying it's the Song residence. Since all members of the Song family passed away, it's off limits to enter here. There aren't many other places they can go to stay out of the public eye. Young mentions that she can't see Heonyung anymore, and Yun confirms it, saying it's because of the day the Empress finds out about her. Feeling hopeless, Young says she doesn't feel like eating anything and is okay with dying now. Yun is shocked and asks how she could say something like that. Young mentions that her mother told her not to die and to get revenge for her. However, she feels like she's failing her mother's last wish. She doesn't care about when she'll die anymore. She doesn't feel like eating, drinking, or even thinking. The only time she feels happy is when she's sleeping because Heonyung is always in her dreams. She ponders about the passing of time and whether he will gradually forget her. As days turn into nights, and nights into weeks, she wonders if he'll still hold on to memories of her. The image of his face, so graceful and noble, lingers in her mind. If only she could feel his touch again, just one more time, it would bring her solace in these lonely moments. She feels the sensation of his touch slipping away, fading into the distance. All she wishes for now is to see him once more. Meanwhile, at the palace, Maiden updates on the Moon King's activities, which seem rather ordinary. However, she remains skeptical and insists on verifying the information herself. The Crown Prince is told that head Maiden wishes to speak with him. He tells her to come in. Seeing him, she thinks to herself that he's not the real Crown Prince. She's known him since he was born, so how could she not have noticed? She asks him how he could do something so despicable, and he explains that his bride was killed. To her, his bride might have just been seen as the goblin's woman. To the Crown Prince, she was just a woman taken in by his beast. To the Empress, she was merely a bird existing to grant her wish. But to him, she was irreplaceable, someone who couldn't be swapped, not even for an angel. She was like a bright light in his life, the only thing that made everything seem okay. Now that she's gone, it's like the light has gone out, leaving everything in darkness. All he can see is the face of the goblin, haunting him in the shadows. The Crown Prince finds himself stuck in a gloomy basement, feeling more and more like a fish every day. He wonders how he'll ever find his way back to the surface. The Empress has transformed into a tree, and he thought about turning her into a doll, but that doesn't sound exciting anymore. Maiden bows before him and offers her head, begging him to let her save the Empress. The Empress is like a sister to her, even though she's not perfect, she's always been kind to others. She's willing to risk everything to rescue the Empress from her current state. Heonyung tells her she can keep repeating herself as much as she wants, but he won't change his mind no matter what. Maiden then suggests that if the Empress could return her lady, but he grabs her by her neck, accusing her of stealing his bride. He demands to know what she did to his bride and where she took her. He questions where she left her to rot and even asks about the body. He expresses frustration, asking how much she must insult his bride to be satisfied. Then, Maiden struggles to say that Her Highness is alive. Young hears her name softly whispered in the air, and for a moment, she wonders if it's Heonyung calling out to her. He's the only one who calls her Younga, after all. But then reality sets in, reminding her of his words, how he said he never wants to see her again. Confusion floods her mind as she questions whether she's losing her sanity in these final moments. Could this be a dream or perhaps a hallucination brought on by her dire circumstances? As she turns around, Young's heart skips a beat when she sees Heonyung. In her dreams, his face always appears sweet and gentle, but now she's puzzled. He asks her why she's staring at him like that. She reaches out to touch his face, feeling his unhappiness. He tells her that without her there, he can't be happy. She asks him why he looks so thin, if he's sick. He apologizes, but she wonders why he's sorry when he's saved her life and brought her here as his wife. She feels like she can die happily now, but he suddenly bursts out asking what she means by that. She apologizes, feeling it's tough for her to go on without him. He questions if she doesn't realize he's right there beside her, but she insists it's merely a dream. Yun made it clear she can't reunite with her king, and he demands to know why she went along with that decision. What if Song turns out to be the goblin, and all he needs is his bride by his side? As long as he's got her there, she hugs him while he cries. She tells him she's sorry for hurting him, sorry she couldn't sing right then, and sorry she's going to die, even though he tried to save her. And if he cries after she's gone, she's sorry for that too. He confesses that if all of this turns out to be just a dream, he'd be scared out of his wits. The mere thought of waking up to find her buried in the valley sends shivers down his spine. She's curious if this dream will bring tears to his eyes. She had hoped that maybe it would be better for him to forget about her, thinking he wouldn't shed so many tears then. As the night slips away and morning rolls in, he's gonna vanish into thin air. She knows she's gonna have to take a deep breath and figure out how to go on without him. But honestly, she's not sure how. The thought of living without him makes her feel so awful and sick to her stomach. It hurts so much, she just wishes she could die. The next day at the palace, Heonyung greets Young with a cheerful good morning. He remarks that she seems to have slept well, but he's the one who couldn't catch any shut-eye. Young is puzzled and asks why he's there. She mentions she's never had a dream like the one she had last night. Then she wonders aloud, wait, was it not a dream? He tells her he couldn't sleep because he was scared. She had hoped that if she could just see him one more time, she could finally rest in peace. But as she looks at him more closely, tears start streaming down her face. She sobs and asks him why he left her there all alone. She was terrified and it hurt so much. He gives her a big hug and admits he made a mistake. He promises to stick around from now on. Let's call it a day, he says gently. Her hands are shaking already. She wonders how she's supposed to stay mad at him for so long. She really, truly loves him with all her heart. If they ever meet again, she hopes they never have to say goodbye. Instead, she wishes they could just stay in that moment forever. He tells her he loves her, and she says it right back. So, one day, the royal prince shows up with this mysterious lady in tow as his guest. And let me tell you, the prince has never acted like this with any other woman before. He's being all gentle and careful with her, like she's made of feathers or something. Of course, everyone's starting to get curious and suspicious about what's going on. Inside the room, Heonyoung tells Young that when they're around other people, she should never call him Heonyoung. She asks if it's because everyone sees him as the prince, and he nods, saying yes. She's really anxious about messing up and getting separated again. He's quick to comfort her, promising that they won't have to go through that pain a second time. But just as he starts to explain further, she interrupts him with a tight hug, not needing any more words to feel reassured. Little did they know, a man happens to catch a glimpse of them inside. In his head, he's like, oh, so that's Queen Moon, the only woman King Moon loves more than anything else, more than his own family, his country, even more than life itself. He figures if he's gotta serve someone, he'd rather help out this prince than that awful one. So, he decides to be their secret ally. Seems like he's not just cutting ties with his brother and parents, but also losing touch with what makes him human. He's all about doing his duty perfectly, but when it comes to making decisions, there's no room for feelings. It's like he's shutting off that part of himself that connects with others. Heonyoung lets Dae-tae-gam know that Young is a super important guest and he needs to make sure she's treated like royalty. While they're sprucing up the guest house, the prince and his guest crash at the Hyunlon Palace. That place is right on the edge of the royal palace and has this huge, deep moat surrounding it. Guards are stationed around to keep an eye on the guest, but seriously, who in their right mind would even try to mess with someone under the protection of the almighty prince? These guards are watching every move, making sure no one gets in or out without a good reason. But it's kinda unclear if they're there to keep the guest safe or to make sure they stay put inside the palace. No one besides the royal prince knows what's going on. There's no chance she'll vanish again. She's not dead, she didn't die last time. Can she make it through this time too? He's expecting her to call out to him by now, but why can't he hear her voice? He's pleading for her to come back, and just like that, he opens his eyes. He wakes up and realizes it's that same old nightmare, just like the one he had yesterday and the day before. It's like a daily torture, feeling so real. Young walks in and sees he's troubled, so she asks if he had a bad dream. He wonders if it's true that there's a song out there that can make wishes come true. She tells him she's not sure if her singing can make wishes come true, but she noticed he seemed to be having a bad dream. She asks if he has a wish and if he still wants her to sing. He replies that his wish has already come true, just by her being there. Then, he leans in and kisses her. The morning feels all sweet and lovely, like something out of a dream, especially with a wish coming true. With this beautiful story comes to an end. Did you enjoy it? Please leave a comment below. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, ciao.